for joining us for this episode of Inside Town Hall. I'm your host, Madeline Shields. Welcome to our socially distanced program this month of Inside Town Hall. We are talking about the impact that COVID-19 is having on our cities and on our state. And joining me is City Councilor Christine Erickson, and her guest is State Senator Kris Langer, who is also the Senate Majority Leader. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's learn a little bit about you, Kris. Tell us about your background and where you're from.
Well, I live in Del Rapids. I've been there for over 20 years. Christine and I first met when we served in the legislature together, so she kind of taught me everything I know about about being out there and how things work. And so I enjoyed that experience, and then have continued on as she decided to come back and serve the city of Sioux Falls.
Sure. Well, great. And let's talk a little bit about this pandemic that we've all been dealing with for the last, 8 weeks now, I think. And let's talk a little bit about what's happening on our local level and on the state level.
Yeah, so I asked Kris to be a guest today just with the impact and what she's hearing on her conference calls with the state, and just feel it's important for us to have those relationships with our Senate and House representatives, with our local officials, because things happen so fast, and it's just nice to have those connections to be able to say, what's going on, what are you hearing, what can we do to partner together, and she can do the same for us. And so those relationships certainly matter a lot. As you know, the pandemic has been something none of us could have ever imagined. It's going to have lasting impacts on everyone, from health to financial to mental illness as well. There's just such a huge impact that it's having. And so it's really, the challenge is balancing all of that. Balancing the actual COVID with all the other lasting impacts that we've had. And we're going to have some tough decisions to make from a state's perspective as well as the city's perspective with budgeting and seeing those shortfalls.
Sure, and people are just not leaving their homes. They're not going out and shopping. And let's talk a little bit about how that affects our state budget, and then how that's also going to affect it locally in all of the cities across the state.
Right. I think the governor continues to address that in her press conferences, that the revenues, especially tourism, I think it was down 89% in the revenue that we get from there. So there'll be just a lot of hard hit areas, but she also is working with a federal delegation to use the dollars that we get, not just specifically for COVID related expenses, but for ongoing expenses as well. Because as you know, we're a low tax state, have a very low budget, and I think she will be successful. I have great hopes that she'll be successful in getting some variability with how we use that money, and that will really make some big impacts on how we keep going forward.
We have to fund education and healthcare, and there are lots of different areas of needs in our state when there isn't a pandemic. Let's talk a little bit about what can we do? Is there anything that citizens can do? And on a state level, a city level, how do we move forward?
Well, I think it's important to recognize it's all about priorities. There's never enough money to fund everything. And even while serving with Senator Langer, we had to make tough decisions. And that was when really money coming in was flush. And so it's a really hard time to be making those cuts and cutting back different programs and maybe not funding the projects that are needed to be funded. And so some of those tough decisions that the Senate and the House will make is in a special session coming up in June. The governor is getting together everyone, and I'm sure it will be ongoing. And maybe if you want to address some of what you're hearing for the future.
Right. In fact, we have not determined for sure that we'll need a special session. I think if revenues are if she's able to have some flexibility with that, there may not be a need for that. We'll just kind of wait and see. We haven't really had a specific date or time, or, some have even questioned whether we're going to be able to get together in June. So it may be later than that, or it may be something that she can just handle. I know she keeps proceeding with executive orders to deal with the different problems that are coming. Yesterday it was title insurance and some different things, that just relaxing some of those guidelines and those regulations that we need so people can get back to work and feel like contribute. I think as far as revenue goes, just remembering to shop local. You know, don't use Amazon. Don't use use your local vendors as much as you can, and that impacts us all and just helps our city, helps our state, helps us just keep functioning like we need to do.
Do you feel like you are able to stay in the loop and know what's going on? How are you communicating with other lawmakers and with the governor's office?
You know, I think it's probably even in some ways better than before, because we are very conscious of, sending emails, sending text, doing Zoom meetings, we've done several different live conference calls with the governor herself. And so I feel like the communication has been great. We also are, in my area with the Sioux Falls City Council, we've always done a great job, I feel like, of communicating needs and things that we need to get accomplished. So I feel like we've done a great job of that.
And sometimes, unfortunately, it takes maybe a tough situation to really increase your communication and realize how important that communication is with a quick text. We're on the phone, we're getting hundreds and hundreds of emails and text messages and Facebook messages of people with opinions of what we should or shouldn't do, and to be able to quickly bounce that off of other legislators, because Senator Langer does represent many different cities, not just portions of, it's many different cities. And so what is she hearing and seeing in some of these other communities? Because since we're so regional, it's so important that what we do in Sioux Falls, also the surrounding community, we're working with those surrounding communities to say, hey, it's not just a Sioux Falls issue. This is our region. And so being able to say, hey, here's what we're going to do. Do you have any ideas, suggestions? Can you get the word out to some of these other smaller municipalities? So we're working together to really have it be a regional impact and not just, here's what Sioux Falls is doing. It's really about that region of how we can work together and making some of those changes. And like Senator Langer said, it's so important to shop local. We don't want people going out in droves to stores, but I have found that many of these places you can call ahead and order and have curbside for your flowers or your mulch or your rock or whatever that is for these projects, for people to be getting those projects done around the house or whatever it might be. And so if we can embrace the innovation of these businesses and us adapt to some of those changes, I think that's really important too.
Who would have ever thought we'd all be speaking to each other over Zoom? Everybody's learned from, when Facebook got huge, now grandma's learning how to Zoom and families are still getting together. What's your reaction? What are you hearing about some of the positive things that are coming out of this crisis?
I do think there's a lot of positives as far as families being more connected, being more together. I know my mom has had one of my nieces stay with her through the time, so she's not as lonely, and she's learned how to Zoom. She knows how to do that now, and learn and just the value of the internet and the connectivity of everything. And so I think everybody's learned from it. I think we're going to come out of this stronger than we were before. I think we'll thrive as South Dakotans. I've appreciated the governor's flexibility as far as the personal responsibility. I thought of that on the way in. Christine and I both raised boys, and it's always easier to suggest to them something to do than to demand what they do. And I think as South Dakotans, we appreciate that as well. Like, be responsible, do what you need to do for yourself and your family. And I think that approach has worked very well.
Trying to get things back to normal, and I know that's a priority, but not too quickly and not waiting too long. How do you find the happy medium that is going to make everyone, okay with this?
I think, unfortunately, the message that has been maybe lost in what we need to do a better job of as people that are elected and others is say, we never, ever intended for people to not get the virus. We intended to make sure that the people had access to care and that you have the ability to get the care that is high quality and not overrun the healthcare systems. That is the absolute key through all of this, that we need to make sure that we're doing it in a slow, methodical approach to ensure that those that need healthcare, they have that ability to go in and get, if you need a ventilator or some of those other things. And so, if we kick this down the road till October or November, it's going to create additional challenges with people pushing off having heart issues or not getting their immunizations for their children. I heard the other day that immunizations are down as well. And so the last thing we need is another pandemic because people didn't get their measles shot or whatever it might be. And so we need to be really mindful of that, and reopening things in a slow, methodical approach is really key.
One of the concerns that a lot of people have had, and you brought up that medical care, is that people are putting off major medical care because they're afraid to go into the clinic. But that, I've heard, is not really the case. You can call ahead. And for instance, I was in the clinic. I happen to be one of 2 patients in the entire huge clinic. They are doing a very good job of that. So do you fear that people, by putting off these medical procedures and getting medical treatment for maybe an ailment that they have, could hurt in the long run?
It certainly could have implications into the future. You know, I was in the doctor's office this last week for getting x-rays on my hand, and I was also one of 3 or 4 people in the office. And just the things that the slowness of everything and the fear that people don't want to go to the doctor, I can appreciate, and it's real. It is very real. But if you've got underlying medical issues and you need to be seen, we need to make sure that people are going and being seen at the doctor. And I think that the more confidence that we can instill in the public is important for us to say, please go to your doctor if you need to be seen. I believe elective surgeries will be happening soon as well, and so we'll start seeing some of those changes, and that confidence, really, we need to do a better job of giving the public a little bit more confidence and making sure that they feel safe to go to the doctor.
Let's talk a little bit again about the advice that you have for citizens and for businesses to navigate how they can bring more customers in and how they can slowly return to normal.
Right, I think Christine touched on it as far as making people feel safe, making your customers feel safe too, and the different precautions that we see that they're doing. We happen to go to the same hair salon, and just we're visiting about the different procedures that they have, disinfecting between and calling and making sure that they're ready to have you come in, and having as few people in there as possible. And I think if we continue to practice those different kind of strategies, and restaurants as well, if we can limit. I know one of our local establishments, it was really kind of funny. There was a couple older gentlemen sitting in the parking lot, and I went in for takeout, and they said, "You can't go in. I'm the 10th one that's going to go in next." Waiting to go in and see their friends, and so I think as we navigate through that, and the business owners trying to follow that protocol, but they were very protective about, I'm the next one that gets to go in. Yes. You have to come back out, because I said, I promise I'm just getting my takeout food. So I think we all are missing our social time, and now with the nicer weather and being able to be outside, I think that's really going to make a difference and make people just, I think our spirits need to be lifted. That, we've talked a lot about mental illness and just depression, and people really, we're social people. And so I think it's nice that I'm glad that in some ways that this pandemic is the time of year that it is, because I think it would be much worse if we were just going into winter now and feeling more isolated because of that. So I think this nice warm weather will help.
And part of the mental health concerns is that people are home. There are a lot of people that don't have family around them. Have you heard, or are there an increase in calls maybe to 211 helpline center? There
has been an increase. The latest statistics was that there's 20,000 calls already first quarter, which is really, really high. And so my encouragement to the public would be, check on your neighbors, check on your friends. Oftentimes people just want to know that you think of them. And, I sent a bunch of personalized text messages to a few friends I haven't gotten to see for a while. Just, hey, friend check, how are you? And, most said, great. Others said, I'm really having a tough day. Thank you for thinking about me. And so if we can all just really be neighborly and be South Dakotans together to check on our friends. And you might appear to be the most confident person in the world, but it's nice to know that somebody's checking in on you, just making sure that you're okay. It's important.
Sure. Well, great. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to talk about with either with the state level or where you're going on from here?
I don't think so, other than, as Christine said, be South Dakotans. I think we've gotten through this very, very well, considering. I mean, we've got, I think the last time I looked, we had the lowest death percentage in the nation, and I think that's incredible. I think it shows that we're really blessed with the healthcare systems that we have and the experts that we have, and the fact that they use the facts and the data and the science. I know people kind of make fun of that. I've heard my friends say, "Quit saying that," but that's really how the governor has led at this time, and I appreciate that as well as our counselors and our commissioners and all of those that are leading us. I think they've done a great job.
Okay, well, great. Yes. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
When we come back, we will talk about the city of Sioux Falls, and we will visit with the city's finance director. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Inside Town Hall, where we are talking about how we are all navigating this pandemic and how it is affecting our city and state budgets. Joining me is City Councilor Christine Erickson, and her next guest is Shaun Pritchard, who is the Finance Director for the City of Sioux Falls. Thanks for joining us. So you're the money guy. You need to tell us, how is this affecting us? What are we going to anticipate going forward with revenues, and how can we as citizens help make this better?
So certainly, I mean, I don't think it's unexpected that people expect that sales tax revenues for the city are going to drop off. We rely on two primary sources of income, and that's property taxes to support operations, and sales taxes, which support our operations, but they also support our capital projects as well. And so sales taxes, of course, is expected to decrease. What that is actually going to be yet is completely undetermined. So people, I'm going to say this is being recorded on May 1st. So my answers today could be entirely different than what they are 2 weeks from now as we get more data and more information. But right now, people are reading in many newspapers about cities that are cutting budgets, furloughing employees, and putting out numbers as to what their expectations are. I think that's a bit ahead of the curve at some point, because we don't know how long or how deep this gets. And without having that information, you can make grand estimates, but to assign specific numbers as to actually the amount that it's going to impact you is a little difficult. And so what we look at it is a way of, okay, in different situations, how do we react? And so we've looked at, okay, if we reduce sales taxes by 10% on an annualized basis for the city, how are we going to react to that? And start planning for that. If it's 20% in some cases, what does that look like? I can say that, in the depth of the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, we had a reduction of 5.8%. So that gives us a level of a bar that we're kind of looking at. This is a much different situation. I would say it's come upon us much more quickly, but there's also the opportunity that it goes away much more quickly because we don't have I wouldn't say the economic structural changes or problems that were in the economy at that time. We don't have those now. This is, I don't want to say fleeting, but it is somewhat temporary. Like the structure, the underlying foundation of the economy is still very strong in most respects. And so there's an opportunity to move out of this more quickly, in my estimation.
Well, we were just, talking earlier about how, I need to go get my hair done, and I want to go out to eat, and I want to go see my friends. Do you see that once things start getting back to normal, that then people are going to be eager and anxious to get out and go shopping and do those things? And can we recover some of this lost revenue?
For me personally, I think that there's going to be somewhat of a public hesitancy for that. We don't want everyone just to go out in droves and have it be just, will we ever be really back to normal? I don't know. I think that this will really guide us forever, whether it's a handshake or an elbow bump or whatever it is. But I think that people will slowly start gaining their confidence back to go out into public and go to their favorite restaurant and go get their hair cut and go do some of those things that they are comfortable with. as long as they're feeling healthy. You know, if you don't feel healthy or you don't, you're worried, stay home. You still have the option to stay home. But I'm really excited about some of these opportunities and options for people to start moving about in other ways. And I think that will slowly start happening here in the near future. I'm amazed with the innovation of a lot of these businesses. It is incredible to see the support from some folks. Easter dinner, I chose to not cook, and we ordered a huge buffet takeout, and it was so organized, so easy. Really, by the time of me cooking it all, it was affordable. And so the ways that people are innovating to making sure that they're keeping their lights on and doing some of those things, there's been some hard hits and hard decisions by a lot of businesses that have had to let people go. And so it's been tough. It's been a challenge, and we hear from those businesses every single day. And so I'm hopeful for them to be able to get back open and really have that stability and that financial stability as well.
What can we look forward to as we slowly start to move forward and try to open some of these businesses, and what can we see happening in the city of Sioux Falls?
Well, one example that Director Pritchard and I were talking about is how even city businesses being innovative. And one example I'll share and have you share what else you're seeing is the libraries just launched going curbside. They have beefed up their digital offerings as well as their online programs. And so having that be an option for folks as well is really, really important. And so they're getting innovative in their own way to making sure that people aren't congregating. As we know, school is out, and oftentimes libraries can be a place of congregation for our youth, which isn't always a bad thing, but we just need to be mindful of that as we move forward. And so offering those services is really important, and it's happening here now in Sioux Falls, and the branch libraries outside of Sioux Falls that we partner with will be also kicking that off here in the near future.
Mm-hmm. And the parks and bike trails, how is that going?
The tape was removed off of the playground equipment, and things are slowly starting to be opened up. The dog park is another one that those were just opened as well. And so you'll see people really getting excited about being outside as the weather warms up. Those things are wonderful and great, and I support, but we've got to get open some of the other things that impact the economy and impact just the everyday worker with that.
I think I'll add on to that a little bit. I think there's going to be three factors as we continue to kind of phase into those. Mm-hmm. And the public is going to vote with their feet as to what they're comfortable with too. But mm-hmm. from a strategic standpoint for the city, you're going to have three factors. One is first and foremost public health, and so those considerations have to be taken into account. And how do, say, youth sports activities or other things change or adapt in order to best protect the public health given the situation that we're in right now? And so their ability to adapt and innovate is going to be key into how things get reintroduced. The second is going to be financial. Certainly with reduced revenues, we're going to have to look at staffing and how that looks. And the last is really logistical, and that is, we've paused on hiring a lot of seasonal and part-time employees, and we usually hire hundreds for the summer, and we've filled that gap by realigning our existing full-time staff, but we're filling the gap to provide the very, very base minimum. But in order to do things like supporting youth sports or pools or anything of that nature, the additional staffing support may be necessary. Hiring those people, paying for those salaries, those are all considerations that have to be taken into account as we look at that going forward too.
So let's talk a little bit about the city employees. They are not being furloughed, and they are still working, but they may not be doing the job that they were hired for.
Yes, so we quickly adapted, and I have to give it to our IT department working with across the city to really provide an opportunity for many people to be able to work from home and to innovate in that respect. And things like being able to open up our pipeline or our broadband into the city to accommodate that, getting WebEx and online video platforms to be able to communicate. I probably do 3 or 4 or 5 video WebExes every single day, and I'm still in the office, but many of my colleagues or some of the staff is able to work from home from a finance perspective, and we utilize that system all the time. So that has been huge. We've adapted in that respect. And in order to avoid furloughing employees, we've looked, tried to reach in other areas. One is our full-time staffing, really being very methodical and strategic in what positions we fill. So there's only a few positions that we filled, and we've carried many openings right now and just left them open if they're not meeting a really critical need for the city right now. The second is that realignment. In particular, I oversee the parking, the area of public parking for the city as well. And one thing we've done is, public parking is down. People aren't at the metered parking as much. We don't have as many people in the ramps right now. Enforcement isn't as big of a need at this point. And so we've realigned 4 of those personnel over to parks to cover those seasonal hires that they would have already made. We've had many people from libraries also be realigned into the park system. So it's outside of their job duties right now, but it's a one-team approach to the city. Is let's try to maintain our staffing, but let's realign them in a way that's strategic and make sure everybody keeps working.
I have time for one last question, and it's going to be about road construction and maintenance. I don't care what happens in the world, that will still go on, right? We're
Yes.
I see orange cones everywhere still. It's road construction season.
Exactly. You're getting put down to one lane already, and I'm like, where did all these cars come from? So
Yes, full force
there.
on road construction for this year. Road maintenance, no real shift or changes in that regard in terms of filling potholes and so forth. Those are critical and essential services, and we have to keep up with them. We can't fall behind in our streets. We have set aside a couple of major street reconstruction projects that hadn't been bid yet, and we set aside some design for future year projects as well, holding back, waiting to see what the revenues come in at. And we are in a positive bid environment right now. So if we have the opportunity to release some of those projects, absolutely, now is a great time to be investing in our community. So.
Okay. Well, it looks like that's our time for Inside Town Hall. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
And for more information on COVID-19, or if you have questions or concerns from City Hall, you may contact them through siouxfalls.org. Thanks for watching.